Salutations and welcome, friends, to a very special Trust the Profits episode. I'm your host, Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace, and we are here for the Trust the Profits Preakness Stakes Roundtable, and I am joined by a wonderful group of people that we all work here with on Trust the Profits. El Hombre, our newest member to Trust the Profits, Jessica Tugwell, and you know her from the lounge. You know her from those great pictures that she posts on Twitter all the time. Carson, joining us from parts unknown, but maybe a parking lot outside of Horseshoe, Indianapolis. And so it is thrilling to have all of us here talking about the Preakness Stakes. Really appreciate everybody's time. We're obviously just a few days away from the Preakness and Black Eyed Susan as well. A lot of excitement here in the air for Mage, the potential for the Triple Crown. But let's dive right in. And El Hombre, I'll start with you with our very first question. We'll go through a bunch of these. Everybody's going to have an opportunity to answer. But El Hombre, I'll start with you. What was your thoughts on the Kentucky Derby? Let's recap a little bit. Let's refresh a little bit before we dive into the Preakness. What were your thoughts on the Kentucky Derby, and maybe what did we learn from that particular race?
Based on the race itself, I thought it was pretty much to form. I think our channel, a lot of us liked Mage, not necessarily to win, but to definitely be involved. Angel of Empire got there at the end. Nice run. Pretty much to form the race-wise. It was the few days leading up to it that was wild. My takeaway is what I learned from it was I think that, and this is a Debbie Downer moment maybe, but the Churchill Downs incidents with all the injuries and catastrophic dealings with the horses, sad. I think they have some type of issue. I don't want to deep dive into that too much, but I think we learned that maybe Churchill's got some work to do on their side, but as far as the race went, I thought it was pretty much to form, and it was a great race. Mage, a great champion. Yeah, I hope Mage goes on to more success.
Yeah, absolutely. No, a lot of storylines, like you said, coming out of that Kentucky Derby, whether they were on the track or off the track. Jessica, you were doing some deep dives on pedigree leading up to this. You did a great video for us looking and dissecting Mage's pedigree, but aside from pedigree, or maybe in addition to pedigree, what other things were your kind of big takeaways from the Kentucky Derby this year?
I feel like the biggest takeaway, at least the one that's going to be relevant in the Preakness, is the fact that the inexperience isn't a factor with Mage. He was super professional in that win. There was no greenness in any way, shape, or form that you can kind of write off because going in, my one reservation about him was like, I think this is a really talented horse, but how is he going to deal with 20 horses in his fourth start? And the answer was no issue.
Yeah,
he was not phased in the least, and he looks great coming out of it. So I think that my big takeaway is that experience is not an issue with Mage.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting storyline in general, maybe moving forward, is that inexperience might just become part of what we expect in the Kentucky Derby, that this curse of Apollo might be something that, we talk less and less about every single year as these horses become more and more lightly raced throughout the Derby prep season, and that we might see more and more horses not making debuts till 3 and then having this kind of explosion like we've seen from Mage ascending up the ranks. But Carson, interested in your perspective, what was your big takeaway from the Kentucky Derby, and what did you learn?
I think that I've learned that just don't overthink it, man. I don't know why. I feel like I prep a lot. I get to see a lot of the actual prep races run, so I feel like I know these horses fairly well going into it. And then it's like you kind of you feel like you're trying to beat the system almost. Oh, do I consider these alternate entries? Yes, last year I think it's really more panning out to be a fluke per se for an AE drawing in at the last minute. And with all the defections this year, it was like you felt like you were constantly starting over again. But I think that the early pace holds true. Everybody was thinking, well, will he get, will there be a pace to close into? Will this happen? Will a UAE Derby come to the top? Will the Japan show us the door finally? And really it boiled down to Forte was the heavy favorite going in. If you watched the Cocktail Lounge the week before, I mentioned that I had tossed him. I was not even going to pin him up there prior to any of the rumors of scratching. Yeah. And if you looked at everybody's, I guess, confidence in Forte, who was right there with him, in his few starts with Mage. So, just don't overthink things, I think, at the end of the day. Yeah. And, just to touch on what Jessica mentioned with the relative inexperience, even going into the Preakness. So he only has 4 starts now, and 2 horses in the 2000s era have won with 4 or fewer starts, I believe, or 3 or fewer. 2 of them being with Chad Brown. So Cloud Computing and Early Voting were both relatively experienced and had no issues with the Preakness. So
just to tack on to what you said, Carson, I did the same thing. I was very guilty of what you just said. I had probably $500 worth of bets out in a multitude of different varieties, and Mage was on every single ticket. I loved Mage, but I outsmarted myself and couldn't get the Japanese horses involved. Couldn't keep myself from getting too cute with the bets, and it was like, and I told he was our number 1 on the channel for
I know he was
value bet. I mean, we had him nailed. Yeah, because Matt and I were there at the Florida Derby when he, like you said, he ran Forte within a nose, and I don't know.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely wild. Yeah, don't overthink things, I think, for sure. One of my big takeaways is, at least for 1 year, the rebirth of smaller barns. Gustavo Delgado and Larry Ravelli finishing 1-2 in the Kentucky Derby. I think that's great. Leading up to the Kentucky Derby, what were we talking about? We were talking about Bob Baffert. We were talking about Brad Cox and his huge barn. We were talking about Todd Pletcher and all of his horses that he was bringing. We were talking about these super trainers and all of their horses. And at the end of the day, it was Larry Ravelli and Gustavo Delgado. That's awesome. I saw an amazing statistic that combined, those 2 trainers only had 100 starts leading up to the Kentucky Derby in 2023. I hope this is a sign that that big time owners and connections can trust these types of trainers to get the best out of their horses. I thought 2 Phil's campaign was absolutely masterful. I thought Ravelli did a beautiful job at knowing where to place that horse to make sure he maximizes his points and to make sure that he was coming in fresh into that race. Delgado, I thought, has brought this horse along beautifully as well. So that was my big takeaway from the Kentucky Derby. But it also led to a bit of a question, which is, in this Preakness Stakes that's taking place on Saturday, there's only 1 horse from the Kentucky Derby that is running in that Preakness Stakes, and that is, of course, the Kentucky Derby winner Mage. And this has led to a great amount of consternation and hand-wringing and pearl clutching on horse racing Twitter over whether or not we should change the Triple Crown. And so, Jessica, I will throw this very easy question to you about whether or not you think we should make any changes or modifications to the Triple Crown.
Yeah, I feel like you can make a case both ways, but personally, I'm kind of toward the side of maybe 1 more week between the Derby and Preakness, but also I feel like, is 1 week really going to make a difference? I feel like you hear from a lot of trainers that they're either 2 weeks or a month plus is really that 3 weeks is kind of a weird spacing also. So I feel like it's not really going to make a whole lot of difference. I think that you can make a case that maybe if we spread them out a little more, you'll get more competitive fields. You can also make a case that people will still find reasons to skip races like the Preakness, which in and of itself, like, as much as I hate it as a Maryland native, people aren't really like, oh, we're trying to win the Preakness unless they have the Derby winner. It seems lately that's kind of been the trend. So I don't really think you need to change it yet. Let's keep an eye on things. If this trend is not just a kind of anomaly with the way things have been playing out, then maybe we think about putting another week in there. But I also think that it's a really compelling argument that if you put a month in between it, then you're going to lose the attention span of the general public. That people are going to, they kind of know, like, oh, this is Triple Crown season. And if you start playing with it, it could end up backfiring in a number of ways. So
no, it's funny you say that about, not a lot of people point towards the Preakness. Chad Brown's the only one who appears to be pointed towards the Preakness ever. Skipping the Derby now consecutive years with Early Voting and Blazing Sevens to go to the Preakness. But you're right, most trainers, they're not training up to this. Carson, your thoughts? Do we make any changes? Do we make any? Do we leave things alone? What are your thoughts on the Triple Crown?
Well, I'll try to be as tactful as possible, and I certainly think that there's changes that need to be made, but it's not with the Triple Crown.
Yeah.
The industry needs to figure out, if that's not your goal, that's totally fine and acceptable, and you own the horse, you're investing in that horse, and that's your decision. But to then make changes to something that's been firmly established for quite some time is, I feel like you're just messing with things to, where do we stop? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you on that. And I'm with you. I think we have to make, if we want the Triple Crown to go back to what it was in the 1970s when we saw horses run in kind of all three legs, then we got to make some big changes in the breeding barn. More importantly, we have to change the way we're breeding these horses. We have to change the economics of horse racing in a lot of ways, that people are not making more money in breeding than they are on the track. And, you know, I get it. If you're an owner and you have a horse that is brilliant and you don't want to risk that investment because you're seeing millions of dollars for multiple years down the road as from a breeding standpoint, why would you potentially risk that and run a horse back on 2 weeks rest and maybe endanger the health of that horse or put that horse on the bench for a really long time? You know, and so I get it from an ownership standpoint now, but part of that is because we're breeding such delicate horses and horses that are being bred for speed rather than endurance and durability. So it is frustrating. El Hombre, your opinion, should the Triple Crown be changed? Leave it alone. What's your thoughts?
No, I'll give you an opinion and then a counterpart to that opinion. So on one hand, if you change it, I think you lose all the history of the value of what it was to be a Triple Crown champion. Like the history of going back, the 30-year drought, the American Pharaoh moment, all that is kind of erased to me.
Yeah.
If you do this, because I mean, or not erased, but I mean, like, I don't think it would mean the same thing if you put an extra week in between or change the distance or whatever you're going to do. So there's that element. Like historically, it's like, oh, if you change the NFL season to compare it to football or something,
right,
to 17 games instead of the old 14 game schedule. Well, now all the old records can be thrown out because there's, you know, not even comparable.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with this. So that part of it would suck. I don't know if there's going to be more participation if you change it. If you, like Jessica said, if you put an extra week in between, is that really going to convince somebody to go run the Preakness if they came up like a horse like Two Phils or, you know,
right.
Angel of Empire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Angel of Empire I think would have a great shot to win the Preakness, but not even going to go for it. I mean, what does that tell you? That means the value of the horse is bigger than the value of the race, like you said.
Yeah.
Which is definitely true. I don't know. Do you have to make the purses wild like the
yeah,
like
I mean, that's
like you on the other side of the world there? I mean, I don't know, but clearly the horses are worth more to not race than they are to race. And that's become a problem.
They used to have like a bonus for, you know, points accumulated during the Triple Crown series. And I think that if, you know, if they could find a sponsor for that, that would be something at least to try and get horses at least running in 2 legs, you know, or something. And just a quick
much money,
counterpoint to the breeding thing is that I think that like the economics of it is really the issue more than like the breed hasn't changed that much like in the last 15 years. It's yes, there's a little bit more of an emphasis on like, okay, let me get this 2-year-old who's going to sell real big. But a lot of those horses, you know, like you look at the field for the Derby and Preakness, a lot of them are very commercially bred horses. So it's not like these are horses, you know, it's not like, oh, I'm going to win the Kentucky Derby if I go to this big stamina sire. So it's still the best horses breeding wise. It's just how do we incentivize keeping them on the track longer? I feel like more than that. How do we make racing? You don't make money racing a horse. You make money selling a horse and breeding a horse.
Yeah,
and you race a horse so that you can either sell a horse or breed a horse.
And then the only ones who usually hang around for their 4-year-old year are the ones going to Saudi. You know, that because there's $5 million purses. You know, like that's the difference to me.
Yeah, exactly. Or the ones who haven't proven enough to get themselves a stud deal.
Right. Now you get your Skippy Longstockings, your Last Samurais, your West Willpowers. I mean, yeah, those are the ones sticking around. And you're right. El Hombre, you know, the big ones, Taba and Country Grammar are going over to Dubai and Maidan. And that's where they're going to be.
They haven't quite proved because Country Grammar didn't have a strong 3-year-old campaign. So he went over there and made himself into a monster in his 4-year-old. Hot Rod Charlie, you know, they weren't like those type of horses.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, those are big questions, but now we're going to shift to stuff going on the track this coming weekend. And Carson and I joked this next question might not take very long. And Carson, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Listen, we got the Preakness, but we also have the Black-Eyed Susan the day before, and we might have the best filly in the country running in this race who was not allowed to run the Kentucky Oaks in Feza. Is it just that simple of a single for you, and where's your pick for the Black-Eyed Susan?
Yeah, Friday's probably one of my favorite days of the track. Black-Eyed Susan Day is wonderful. I'm glad that it's drawn the talent that it has this year. I know we do have one defection already, but I'm not going to get into the whole Baffert debate. He doesn't ship across the country for no reason. This filly's phenomenal. I would almost push to run her against the boys, and I know that that's met with some disagreement as well, but I think that she's good enough to do it, and I think that he's going to use the race on Friday as a stepping stone to something bigger for her. So yeah, these are hands down for me.
Yeah. This was one of those when I just got done recording Captain Card, which shameless plug is coming out tomorrow morning. This was the race that I had the easiest time with before I capped any of the other 14 races on the card. I went in and filled out my top pick and top value play in this one. And Feza, I barely even looked at the PPs. 5 for 5. She's done nothing wrong. She's gotten better every single time out. I know you could say maybe the West Coast circuit hasn't been great, but she's been crushing them out there. And honestly, a lot of the circuits haven't been that great in terms of the filly division this year. I think Fairgrounds was good, but as we saw with Pretty Mischievous coming out to win, and a horse like Hoosier Philly, maybe it takes a step forward after having a little bit of a surgery to help clear out her airway. But Feza by a country mile, I think is the way I'll go with this one. I do think there's some nice talent, obviously underneath in this one. Brad Cox has got a couple of horses, and Merlaza in comparative. The rumors are the Todd Pletcher horses are scratching, so we'll see about that. But like I said, there's some other nice horses. But El Hombre, where are you going in this one? Do you like Feza as a single here in the Black-Eyed Susan?
Yeah, for the same reasons you do too. If you're betting horizontals, it really frees everything up, doesn't it? To have that easy single. I mean, now you can spread a little bit everywhere else, but no, I think definitely an easy single. 7 to 5 morning line. I don't think you're going to get anywhere near that, right?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think she'll take a ton of money. Baffert will always take a ton of money.
Gun to my head, I'll put Merlaza underneath for Exacta. Those two straight. Brad Cox, the Florent Giroux, 6 to 1 morning line. I don't know. To be honest, I don't even see betting that race because I just don't see value unless you think you can beat Feza, which I don't think any of us do. I don't know. Maybe Jessica does, but
yeah. Let's see. Jessica, yeah. Are we going to make it 4 for 4? Are you trying to beat her?
Yeah, I'm going to try and beat her.
I love
it. Y'all are making me feel like maybe I'm completely insane to try and beat her. I mean, obviously she is the horse to beat, and she could run off and win by 8, and I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't think she's invincible in here. I think that Merlaza, as El Hombre mentioned, has a good shot. She's improving. Ballpool is interesting to me, and the horse that I admit I have a little bit of a bias toward this horse because Randy Morse trains horses for Little Bluebird Stables, but Taxed is getting good. She took the blinkers off last time and put in a much better effort. She has been training great. I mean, if you watch like the Derby and Oaks workout shows, she looked really good on the track out there. And I think, I don't think, even though she's by collected out of a Yankee Gentleman mare, I don't think the extra 16th is going to hurt her. I think she's going to be tactically placed in a race that has a lot of horses that look like they want to sit like second. So I think she'll be up there. And I mean, if you want to play the who did they beat game and where were they beaten by? So out on the West Coast, FaZe has been beaten, and Tell Me No Lies, who admittedly had some trouble in the Oaks, but never fired in there. Whereas, Tax has been chasing Wet Paint, beat Defining Purpose, who performed a lot better in the Oaks. So, it's not always a direct correlation like that, obviously. But I feel like she deserves this chance, and I think that I think she has a chance to beat Feza.
Yeah, I think the 15 to 1 morning line felt out of proportion. There was no way. I thought, if you're playing Stable Duel, for instance, I thought Taxed made a ton of sense to use on Stable Duel because there's no way that there's no way that horse is going to run 15 to 1 in terms of like how she places compared to the rest of the field. She's running big time races. She ran that entire Oaklawn circuit that you mentioned with wet paint, with defining purpose. And now she actually gets on a dry fast track after the monsoon winter in Arkansas that they had. So it should be an exciting race nonetheless. I mean, obviously Baffert coming back, making a big impression. He always does well at Pimlico. 7 career victories in the Preakness, 3 in the Black-Eyed Susan. So he's a trainer that tends to load up for this type of a day. So we will have to see. But let's transition from the Black-Eyed Susan to Preakness Day. And El Hombre, I'll start with you, or I'll kind of kick things off here. And describe the Preakness field in one word. We talked about the fact that Mage is the only Kentucky Derby horse in the field. I will describe it as workmanlike, which is a hyphenation, but one relative word. But
it counts.
Yeah, thank you. It counts. Judges say it counts. You can't use it in Scrabble, but yeah, workmanlike for me. It's not a bad field. I mean, somebody posted the graphic today that showed last year's field, and I was like, that wasn't much of a field as we look back on it. Like Creative Minister, and as much as I love my son, Simplification, I mean, not a lot there. Early voting and Epicenter were really good, but I mean, Creative Minister finished 3rd and really hasn't done much since then. And a lot of the other horses in that race, I mean, Skippy was in there and has gone on to do some okay things now as a 4-year-old. So, it wasn't overwhelming. And I don't know, this field feels okay to me. I mean, First Mission is a nice horse for Brad Cox, who I think just matured a little bit later than some of his other horses in this crop. And if that's a horse that matures 2 months earlier, he's probably on the Derby trail. A horse like National Treasure was very much so on the Derby trail before being scratched out of the San Felipe, and then kind of had a long layoff before running in the Santa Anita. I think there's some horses that are, halfway decent in this field. And, Blazing Sevens keeps getting a little bit better every time out. I think the Shug McGahee horse is interesting underneath. So, there's some interesting horses here. But El Hombre, I'm interested. One word, how would you describe the Preakness?
I had down uninspiring.
All right, so kind of the opposite of what I've just been trying to sell. All right, I'm trying to get people excited here, and you're killing me. All right,
no, and I think it's just because it's a recent trend. Like you said, last year I think was even worse. But last year I made a video on our channel. I think it was literally titled, "Is this Preakness field the worst field ever?" or something like that, because it was so bad. I mean, just again going back to the first question you asked. There's the Triple Crown. I don't know how to say it. The magnitude of what it used to be, maybe not there anymore. But the recent trend of the fields being strong, it's not there. I don't know. Mage is the only real narrative, and I don't know. The First Mission's kind of. I feel like First Mission's getting all the love just from the contrarian angle, and I don't think that there's anything more to it than that. I don't think that, although First Mission's got a shot. I mean, if anybody's going to win the race outside of Mage, it's probably First Mission, but I don't see it.
I think to some extent we are maybe overvaluing the Grade 3 Lexington Stakes a little bit.
People are looking for an alternative.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they are, and not everybody's been on the block of National Treasure for as long as I have. Just carrying that boulder uphill for the last 6 months on that freaking horse. But Jessica,
yourself, by the way,
very much so by myself on the network. But Jessica, what are your thoughts on this year's Preakness field overall?
Yeah, I guess if I had to give one word, I guess there's a lot of improving type of horses in there.
Yeah.
Like they're horses who look like they have potential, but they just most of them haven't really gotten there yet. As far as
your version of uninspiring, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. But I feel like people were complaining about like the fact that there were only 8 starters, which I think is kind of strange because I mean, that's not very, it's when you look at like the fields of like the Preakness that Triple Crown winners beat, you usually did have like 1 or 2 in there against them, but the average for the last 5 Triple Crown winners was 7.4 starters in the race.
Right.
So there were only 6 horses in the 1973 Preakness, and it was basically Secretariat, Sham, and everybody else. I mean, who did American Pharaoh beat? Dortmund.
Yeah. Don't you know it?
So
Yeah.
I feel like this is it's a decent field. There's a lot of horses who I think you could end up seeing more from, like Perform. I think Red Route 1 is a horse who kind of has the profile of one of those Asmussen horses who just is gonna kind of just be on that slow incline where he runs a lot and he does a little bit more each time. So
Yeah.
I think it's a decent field.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of horses who are getting better. First Mission is one that I like. I liked his Lexington a lot. So
yeah. Now, and I think, certainly the trip, I think, is something we'll talk a little bit more about maybe later in the roundtable, but like certain horses I think are going to get the right trip in this, especially with the way the Pimlico track is going to play. But Carson, what are your thoughts on this year's Derby field overall, or Preakness field, I should say?
Yeah, for Preakness, so Jessica kind of stole my word, improving. So I think I'll say revealing. Mage took a big step up in the Derby. This is his opportunity to do another big step, obviously for his career and also for an argument for leaving the Triple Crown as it is. Right. So if he goes out there and blows the doors off of everybody, then why that conversation's over. First Mission is in a good work cycle. I think that this is a great race for him. And even with it being an 8-horse field, I don't feel post position really affects anybody here. And would you even really want more than 8 horses on those tight turns? So right. I'm good with the number. I'm good with the field size. And unless Bob's getting a 2-for-1 on shipping from California, he's not sending National Treasure to come in last. Right. I don't see that. And I think it's a class up for him. For the horse, and Blazing Sevens, it just wasn't. I don't think that the Derby was a good distance. I don't think he wasn't ready. I just think that it was a little too much. I think Chad felt that was going to be over facing him. I think this distance and field size.
All right. Well, listen, none of us like Blazing Sevens, so we decided to cut Carson out of this conversation because this is just nonsense that, trying to compare this horse to early voting. So listen, let's move to the next question on the roundtable, which is a long shot. Now, El Hombre, I know you love Mage, but you also like to try to find at least a little bit of value, maybe even underneath if you're playing a vertical or something like that. So is there a horse that's a little bit of a higher price that you think might be able to outrun their odds in this race?
My initial answer was a horse that's a long shot, like 15 to 1, I think we talked about.
Usually like 10 to 1 or higher, but yeah, something like that.
I had none. I don't like any of them, but if you gun to my head me again, perform the close, the cute story out of Laurel Park, the last great showing.
Yeah.
Big inspiring close. But I don't think this, first of all, I don't think Perform's on Mage's level, but also I don't think this race is going to set up for that to happen. There isn't a whole lot of pace here. It's going to be a slower pace. I think, you never know what's going to happen, but I don't see a situation where Perform's going to have a high pace to close into. So for that reason, I don't like any of the long shots. I just think Mage is going to win. I don't want to, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show. Let's not outsmart ourselves. I think that Mage is going to win this race. Maybe underneath. You want to get cute with I don't know. Actually, at any price, I don't really like any of them more than the other, to be honest with you. I just think it's a battle for second, third, and fourth. It could be any of them. I don't know if this race is bettable, to be honest.
Yeah. Jessica, you mentioned Perform before. You mentioned Red Route 1 is a horse that kind of slowly, steadily improves. We finally saw him get there last time out in the Bathhouse Row Stakes. Interested in whether or not there's a value play that you like in this particular race.
Yeah, I like Perform. I don't know that he can win, but I think he should hit the board. And I don't think he needs to be as far back as he was last time. On his maiden win, he wasn't all that far back. And I mean, he used to be more of a speed horse early on in his career. And I mean, it was really, he stumbled at the break last time in the Tessio. So I think that was a big part of that move we saw. And clearly he proved that he does well with a target in his last 2 races. But so I think they'll take him off. And I don't think the pace is going to be that slow. I think it's going to be like the sort of a Derby situation again, where there's a lot of those horses who have some tactical speed.
Somebody has to send, right? I mean,
at Pimlico especially, like someone's going to go. Coffee with Chris, his only only hope, I feel like, would have to be if he goes out there and gets Brave, which I don't think is going to happen, but I definitely could see him being a pace factor. National Treasure has a little bit of speed. First Mission has a little bit of speed. And even Mage, can be relatively tactical. He wasn't in the Derby or in the Florida Derby, but he was pretty close in the Fountain of Youth, and he went wire to wire on it in his debut.
Yep.
So I think that Perform will get a decent enough trip and enough pace for what I don't really see as he's not a dead closer the way Red Route 1 is.
Yeah.
And he's a horse who's improving at the right time. It's okay. It's the one question mark I do have with him is that his 3 best races came with Lasix. And I do wonder if after 4 tries without Lasix, and then he comes back as a 3-year-old and they have Lasix on, was that part of what moved him up? But there could be so many things that moved him up. Was it the Lasix? Was it the fact that he stretched out in his last 2 races? Was it the fact that now he's 3? So there's a lot of things there that it could have been that went into that, but he would be my long shot.
Yeah, I think Perform is he's a horse you have to I think, in a lot of ways, because if you go back and look through his PPs, I mean, he's run against a variable who's who of the Derby trail. I mean, those maiden special weights, he was running against huge horses and coming up on the short end of it, but running against really good competition in maiden special weight races, and even lost to Mage in a maiden special weight race back at Gulfstream Park. So, then, like you said, took the step forward, I think, a little bit. I think also going up to Tampa was a softer spot. You mentioned the Lasix, but that was just a softer field. Finally broke the maid, and then immediately goes up to Laurel and breaks and wins a stakes race coming back. I think there's a lot to like there. I think Red Route 1 is a horse people are going to probably overbet a little bit. I think this race doesn't necessarily set up that well for him, and the Pimlico configuration doesn't necessarily set up too well. I think that making a dynamic move around the third and fourth turns is a little bit dicey, and so I'll probably go play against Red Route 1 a little bit there. So that's one where, like I said, from a long shot standpoint, I will be I'll be using Perform probably underneath in this sort of a spot. But listen, we put her in timeout for a little while because she brought up Blazing Sevens, who we don't think is worthwhile. But we're allowing her back in. Carson, thank you so much for coming back.
Couple minutes timeout.
Yeah, you had to be in timeout for a little bit. Yeah, we just, Blazing Sevens couldn't, it couldn't do it. So, but you're back just in time to go over our Preakness picks. And so, El Hombre, Jessica, I'm going to start with you. As the Maryland native, we should give you the honors and let you give the pick for this year's Preakness Stakes. So who do you got? Who's going to win?
I've got Mage. I'm boring with it. I do like First Mission and Perform. That would kind of be my cold try. But I like Mage.
There you go. Carson, if you bring up Blazing Sevens again, you're going back in timeout. So just be careful with that. Who do you like here in the Preakness?
I'm going to have to go with First Mission. I think he can sit off the pace and get up there at the end. He's got nice speed. Like I said, he's in a good form cycle. I don't think the outside post really matters at this point, given the field size.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. No, First Mission to the hoop for Carson. I have been banging the drum for National Treasure all freaking year.
Oh, wow.
I love this horse. Going back to his 2-year-old campaign. Carson, I think you brought it up, or maybe Jessica, you did. Bob Baffert's not shipping this horse for nothing. And I just think he's getting blinkers on. You got Johnny Velasquez on the rail. They're going to send. And I hear you, Jessica, with Coffee with Chris, his only move is to go. I just think National Treasure could potentially be in another class. And so we'll see. And so I think he just outfoot him to the turn more than anything else. And he'll have the inside position. And then it's just a matter of National Treasure's issue is that he always doesn't he doesn't pass horses necessarily. He kind of runs. If he breaks third, he kind of runs third. If he breaks, fourth, he runs fourth, sort of a thing. And now he could potentially break first. And I just remember last year, they souped that track up at Pimlico to the point where early speed was a cheat code. And if they do something like that again, I'm sorry, but anybody coming from off the pace doesn't have a chance. And so I'm going to use National Treasure. And if I win, I'm doing a victory lap kind of like I did with 2 fills hitting the board, and I did my victory lap in the Kentucky Derby. So 2 victory laps for the first 2 legs of the Triple Crown is what I'm rooting for. But here, the president of the Mage fan club, El Hombre, who are you going to be picking in this one?
Honestly, I'm not just saying this because I liked Mage way too much in the Kentucky Derby to not do a victory lap.
I know.
But I honestly feel like everybody else is just trying to be contrarian here. And I get it because it's hard to bet an even money favorite. I probably won't even bet the race, to be completely honest with you, unless if you really like Perform for second, which I kind of do. I kind of agree with Jessica. Like that's the horse that I like Perform more than First Mission, to be honest. So if you're going to, bet the race, maybe it's a Mage Perform exacta. Yeah. Find some value that way. I'm not going to bet Mage to win at even money or less because it's not that much of a lock for me, but I just feel like you're just trying to be cute.
So let me ask you this. So are you
Mage is pace proof? Good.
Are you going to single if you're going to do horizontal sequences over the Preakness, are you going to single Mage in that leg?
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this with Feza. Like that's a way to free up. If you have a free square, you feel like you have a free square. It's certainly a way to free up the board.
I really don't see
your tickets.
Unless Mage, and we know Mage has not been the greatest starter on earth, but
right.
We saw the Florida Derby. You had the 2 worst starters in the history of horses racing between.
We'll go that far. But yeah, they were bad. It was bad.
So, but Mage, Mage lost by a nose to what was arguably the best 3-year-old in the crop.
Right.
And then went out, won the Derby fairly. I won't call it easily, but fairly easily.
Now, I mean, those top 3 really separated from everybody else. I mean, it really was kind of
Angel of Empire had some in the bag. Probably left a little too late, but
And 2 fills hung on after I thought a gutty effort.
2 fills had a great race.
But those 2 were 3-4 lengths clear of everybody else. So, well, listen, if Jessica and El Hombre are right and Mage wins the Preakness, I want to start with you, El Hombre. What percent chance, if he gets this second leg, what percent chance do you give Mage to win the Triple Crown?
And I'm gonna go with a cheap percentage here because it sounds like an easy cheat code, if you will. But I'm gonna go 50-50.
All right. No, I think that's fair.
And here's why. Like I think that Mage. First of all, the Belmont's the toughest. It's the longest race. You're coming off the short rest. There's so many things going against you going to the Belmont. Plus, I think the Belmont field is going to be much tougher than the Preakness field.
Yeah.
So that opens up the doors of doubt, right? So you have that element. But I think even with the doors of doubt about who's coming back, is it Tappet Trice, is it Angel of Empire, is it blah, 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 Forte, any of those? Even with all that, I'll give 50% chance that Mage runs it back for the Triple Crown because I just think Mage is maybe just better than all of them. I mean, based on that Kentucky Derby alone, I feel like even with those other elements stacked against Mage, I still give him a shot to do it.
Yeah.
A 50-50 shot.
Yeah. No, that's a pretty good shot, actually, I think, to be able to do it. I mean, that's and certainly the other part of this is who's going to be running against him, who's going to be waiting for him in Belmont. Tappet Trice is certainly the one name that seems to be the horse that will be waiting for him at Belmont, according to Todd Pletcher, his trainer. Right. But listen, Jessica, you and I have talked about Mage's pedigree before. Obviously, good magic out of Curlin. The distance shouldn't be an issue. I mean, we'll see. I mean, the distance gets a lot of people. I mean, Tappet's, particularly Tappet Trice, Tappet Offspring, I think have won 4 of the last 9 Preakness or Belmonts that have been run at 1.5 miles. And so, it could be a tough task. So what percentage would you give Mage if he gets past the second leg of the Triple Crown?
Yeah, I was also kind of thinking 50-50, maybe more like 45% chance. Like I'm a little more like of the 50-50, I lean a little bit toward being skeptical of it. But it's absolutely
a big shot, right, Jessica?
That's exactly. That's
huge. That's pretty confident going into that. You have, there's a lot of factors.
Exactly. I think he absolutely has the talent to do it. It's mostly a matter of, in a horse that is lightly raced, he's now going to have, 5 races this year by June, which shouldn't be a lot, but could be a lot.
Yeah.
And the competition that's going to be coming for him, and the distance, the 1.5 miles is just always a question mark.
Yeah.
I feel like with every horse, you just have to be a little bit skeptical.
That's the doubt. That's the 50% of doubt. Right?
Exactly. I think it's a combination of mostly the competition that's going to be waiting for him rested, and can he put in another big effort? If he can manage to win the Preakness easily, and he doesn't have to run a big race to do it, I think that helps.
Oh, absolutely.
Let me say something, Matt, before you go. I think we can put the Preakness behind us already. I'll go that far. Like I'm 90% confident. I'll go 90% that he wins the Preakness. Like it's almost. First of all, I'm rooting for him big time because I think it's huge for the industry.
I know
in general that he goes for the Triple Crown.
Yeah,
but no, I'd love to see it. I think it's great.
Now, were you this confident in Tapit Trice before the Kentucky Derby? I need to go back and remember. Oh, wait a second. Yeah.
No,
the Japanese horse. All right.
Nope.
Yeah, all right.
I'll never be that confident in anybody in the Kentucky Derby. It's too big of a field.
I know. I'm just giving you a
hard
time.
Yes, but I do. Tapit Trice is the one horse that scares the hell out of me for the Belmont.
Sure. I mean, he's got the pedigree and he's going to be rested. Yeah. No, he's
Forte good too. Those three. I mean,
I want Forte in the Belmont.
Yeah, I don't think Pletcher even said before all the drama broke. Pletcher even said if he doesn't run in the Preakness, he's going to the Jim Dandy. He's going up to the Saratoga. He's not going to run in the Belmont. And I'll be honest, I don't know if we see Forte again. But that's just a personal opinion. I have no inside knowledge of that. I just think the way things are trending, it may not be looking great.
Model problem you have in the industry, right?
A little bit. And so in terms of my percentage chances, I'm probably less bullish. I'll probably go about 35%, which actually, historically speaking, is still probably a really high percentage that a horse is going to win the Triple Crown.
50 is really high.
Yeah, no, I think so. And so 35% is kind of my number. I think that he's absolutely got a shot if he gets past this one. Tapit Trice is the horse that I'm most worried about. It doesn't seem like Angel of Empire is headed towards Belmont. It seems like Brad Cox is going to keep that horse, maybe focused on some of the Midwestern derbies, maybe going, and then focused up on Saratoga. So it doesn't seem like that's going to be in his plans. I don't think Bishop's Bay or Arcangelo is going to go to the Belmont. It certainly seems like Arcangelo will not. Because I think Jenna Antonucci will probably do right by that horse and maybe let him have a little bit of a time off before running another big race. But, that Peter Pan didn't have much else in it. And that's kind of the other route to the Belmont is go to the Peter Pan and then go to the Belmont. Bishop's Bay is a nice horse and certainly showed a little something more than I was expecting. But, I don't know if he's the one that's going to be waiting there for him either. And if he is, doesn't necessarily scare me. So I'll say 35% just because maybe it is a gutty effort that kind of requires him to, takes a little bit more out of him to win the Preakness. So we will see. But listen, El Hombre, Jessica, thank you so much for popping on this roundtable discussion of the Preakness Stakes. We appreciate Carson, but she brought up Blazing Sevens too many times, and we had to kick her out yet again. So listen, make sure to press that subscribe button here on YouTube. Make sure to like this video. Let us know your answers to all these questions. We'd love to hear your feedback. For El Hombre, for Jessica Tugwell, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it is now post time.